At quarterback, Missouri has been so close in the transfer portal. But you know what? I don't think that's something you can hold against Eli Drinkwitz.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And of course, I do want to indirectly get into Eli Drinkwitz, all the talk about, well, him maybe being in the coaching market after the season. I want to start by, in that realm, talking about drama at LSU, Florida needing a bit of a dose of realism. Also, maybe Missouri should play a little bit scared the rest of this season, despite what Drinkwitz says. Also want to tell you before I start the program that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And by the way, for all you everydayers out there, sorry for not getting you a podcast yesterday. I'll be honest, this one might be my last one of the week, too. Missouri on a bye week. I might just take a little bit of a bye 3-day weekend myself. But you know what? I've noticed a lot of Missouri fans online, now that Drinkwitz's name is naturally coming up for really high-profile jobs like LSU and Florida. I'm going to get to those places here later in the program. But now that those types of jobs are coming open, it's natural that Eli Drinkwitz, Lane Kiffin, those types of names are going to come up. But that's also caused some Missouri fans to sort of take a look at Drinkwitz and almost as a protection mechanism go, well, maybe Drinkwitz isn't so great already. Let's pump the brakes there. I very much want to keep Eli Drinkwitz in the fold. But the reason some people are saying this is because specifically in the transfer portal, well, Eli Drinkwitz has been this close at least a couple times to landing, well, if not the best quarterback in the cycle, just a huge difference maker for sure. Because Fernando Mendoza, who is now the quarterback of Indiana, maybe the best team in the country right now are the Hoosiers. Well, if Mendoza comes to Missouri, as was a possibility, he took an official visit to Missouri for whatever reason. Well, Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz could not close on Mendoza. The Tigers initially were interested mostly in Miller Moss, who ends up at Louisville. Well, obviously ends up settling, if you want to say that, for Bo Prabula of Penn State. And I will say this. Certainly, you got to assume if Missouri was able to close on Mendoza, this team looks quite a bit different. Now, I wouldn't say it's Jayden Daniels' level of regret here, but not too far off either. And by the way, on that Jayden Daniels thing, this is the other side of the equation. All the way back in 2022, when Jayden Daniels, now with the Washington Commanders, Heisman Trophy winner at LSU, well, Missouri basically thought they had Daniels in the bag to the point where when Daniels ends up, well, changing his mind and going to LSU, Missouri really did not have a backup plan. In fact, well, you went from Jayden Daniels to Jack Abraham. No offense to Jack Abraham, that's not a backup plan. That is falling off a cliff to your death in terms of a plan at quarterback. Now, fortunately, obviously, Missouri did have a backup plan in Brady Cook. How much Eli Drinkwitz actually believed in Brady Cook in 2022, that offseason, well, that's a whole other matter up for discussion. The bottom line here is that a lot of people now, a lot of Missouri fans are using this opportunity to sort of nitpick Eli Drinkwitz a little bit. And I just simply don't think that that's fair, because considering just how close Missouri and Drinkwitz was to getting Jayden Daniels, they were right in there on Fernando Mendoza. And yes, while obviously the Bo Prabula thing so far has not worked out how Missouri would have liked it to, it's not a Jack Abraham level of fall off from the next players that you were looking at, that type of deal. I'd say Miller Moss has been solid at Louisville. By the way, I don't know that he's been a complete world beater or anything like that. So, and here's the other thing. Maybe Missouri has finally hit on a quarterback here with the true freshman Matt Zollers. We're going to have a decent idea if that's true, by the way, over the next few weeks here. Not that I'm expecting perfection or even true greatness, that's for sure, from the true freshman for the young man over the last few weeks here. But generally, the special ones give you an idea pretty early. So it is going to be interesting to watch Matt Zollers on, not just for this season, but predicting toward the future as well over the final few weeks here. Speaking of Pribula, well, if Zollers plays well enough here over these final few weeks of the season, old Bo Pribula might be looking for the transfer portal once again. Boy, life comes at you awful fast in college football here. And speaking of which, well, Pribula had a non-fracture dislocated ankle is what Missouri is calling it here. According to Eli Drinkwitz, he says this only occurs in about 1% of ankle injuries. It's considered a taekwondo type of injury, so not something that normally happens in football. Basically, what this is telling you is, well, I'll just continue the quote here. Drinkwitz says there's no surgery, there are no broken bones, but it was a dislocation that had to be corrected. We're working toward recovery now. Don't know the timetable on his return. So as of now, Missouri is basically saying he's week to week, whatever you want to call it. I think that's about as honest as they can be at this point. This is such an unusual ankle injury, especially for football. You don't necessarily know how his body is going to recover from this. You don't have a lot of great examples of this, and especially at quarterback, guys coming back from an ankle dislocation in season, one that has no fractures, no torn ligaments. So truly, if you're Missouri, how do you put a timetable on that? So I think the Tigers who are generally pretty honest about injury situations, I think under Drinkwitz, I think they're being about as forthright as they can be here. It's kind of same deal with Brett Norfleet. He's considered day-to-day after a separated shoulder in the Vanderbilt game. Quote, "We are working to strengthen that shoulder, and his progress will be updated on the SEC injury report," end quote. Of course, that injury report will come out next week. So, you know, Brett Norfleet, I think he had a similar kind of injury last season, early last year. I don't know that he sat out a ton with that injury, but it definitely affected him for the rest of the year. So this is going to be one of those things where perhaps Brett Norfleet can gut it out here at the end of the season with this, but it's hard to imagine that he's going to be as effective of a player as he was for the first half of the season. So not great news here for Missouri, but obviously not the worst news it could have been either. So bottom line, while the Tigers have not had the perfect portal haul at the quarterback position yet under Drinkwitz, I would say give it time. Missouri's been circling around the right people, I would say, with the benefit of hindsight. It just hasn't always quite worked out here. And I'll be honest with you, going back to 2022, I didn't even think missing out on Jayden Daniels was the end of the world at the time. I felt like, wow, this guy's a really great Brad Smith type of runner, but he's also a one read and go type of player in the passing game. Well, honestly, in 22, I think that was a pretty good evaluation. The thing was, though, in 2023, Jayden Daniels made a massive leap in the passing game. He's credited a lot of it to virtual reality training on the football field, if you were, and just putting on the old VR goggles and kind of getting extra reps, that kind of thing. He really credited that with improving his ability to read defenses and all that good stuff. The point here is that, well, even if you have good evaluations, a lot of this stuff is a crapshoot, simply because who could have predicted the massive leap Daniels would have had between 22 and 23? And now, obviously, of course, we're seeing the player that he is at the NFL level. But regardless, we got to keep Eli Drinkwitz around. I think most Missouri fans would certainly agree with that. But the reality is, over the next month or so, in a vacuum of information, as I like to say, well, there's going to be a lot of speculation out there. Speculation about whether Drinkwitz would be willing to go to LSU or Florida, for example. Well, for as much as those historically great programs that have won national titles are going to be tempting for anybody, well, they have their own problems too, and they've been laid quite bare here over the last couple of days and weeks or so, in my humble opinion. So let's talk about that moving forward. A bunch of variables for Eli to keep in mind. But you know what? Also, we got to talk about Mazda, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply a move. And you can feel the craftsmanship, by the way, in every single detail, from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery, and you can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And like our players, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. It is Mazda. Move and be moved. Now, a lot of people understandably would assume that if Eli Drinkwitz were offered the LSU job under any circumstances, well, he would jump at the opportunity, because obviously LSU is a very compelling job for any college football head coach. But here's the thing, though. If everything were a bed of roses in Baton Rouge, then Brian Kelly would not be fired. And it's not just, of course, the lack of wins and losses. There's a whole bunch of sticky wickets happening in LSU, just like there is in every other job throughout this country. And as I've said before, Eli Drinkwitz has figured out how to navigate the University of Missouri. That much is clear. And he's navigated his way all the way to the top of the food chain. That's going to be another challenge to have to face at Florida and LSU, challenges that go beyond the football field. And to the point where Louisiana's governor, Jeff Landry, by the way, is now throwing his 2 cents in all over the place on this LSU coaching matter. Boy, I can remember Missouri Governor Jay Nixon saying that the big Missouri to the Big Ten famously was a done deal. How did that work out? Did that help Missouri, him sticking his nose into that situation, or not? I would say much is the same here. I think that question answers itself. And basically, the governor here, Jeff Landry, even went as far to say that LSU's athletic director here, Scott Woodward, would not be selecting the next coach at LSU, and also criticized the buyout number of $54 million, saying, hey, we're not going to be doing that kind of thing again. Really? You're not going to be fully guaranteeing your contract? Really? If you're going to try to lure Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz or Nick Saban, for that matter, we want to really get crazy, really, you're going to lure those guys from their current jobs or out of retirement without a fully guaranteed contract? Here's the thing. If all of these coaches are getting fully guaranteed contracts, in other words, that's why Brian Kelly got $54 million. That's what he was still owed left on his contract. Well, feel free to build a time machine, because that's what you're going to need. That whole idea, the toothpaste has left the tube on that particular topic, because if you're going to actually compete for one of the best coaches in the country, as obviously LSU is going to and wants to do, if they're going to pay $54 million, so then you're going to just cheap out on the next guy, what complete and utter nonsense, by the way. The governor also took a swipe at Jimmy Sexton, by the way, basically complaining that the coaches are all represented by the same agent, that being Jimmy Sexton. And guess who he represents? He represents Eli Drinkwitz. He also represents, I don't know, probably Lane Kiffin. I don't have that one off the top of my head. I feel like that's a pretty safe bet, though. Point here is, most of these guys at the very, very top, including Brian Kelly, that's where this came from, are represented by the same guy. So again, Just a whole bunch of stuff here happening at LSU behind the scenes. And some people might dismiss this and say, hey, this is just the governor shooting off his mouth, et cetera, et cetera. The actual money people, the people in charge at LSU are going to ultimately make this decision. Fair enough. That's fair enough. I'm just telling you, all of this noise, none of this is a positive sign that things are honky-dory necessarily with LSU and their athletic administration. By the way, a lot of people are saying, hey, if you're Auburn, since there are so many prominent jobs out there, including Penn State, including Arkansas, UCLA on the market, that teams like Auburn should actually be scared of this hiring cycle. Hey, just roll Hugh Freeze over for another year and go to the next season. I think that's really erroneous thinking for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, why are you assuming that next year's cycle won't be just as crazy? In a world where athletic departments are willing to pay $50+ million to buy out their coaches, whether it is Jimbo Fisher or James Franklin or the previously mentioned Brian Kelly, why are we assuming that's going to stop now? If you need to change your coach, then change him now. Don't be in a Florida situation where you probably should have fired Billy Napier last season only to bring him in and you're already ready to fire him after losing to South Florida in September. By the way, speaking of Florida, speaking of South Florida, I really think the Gators could probably use a bit of a dose of reality. They're thinking, hey, Lane Kiffin might be our guy, and if it's not him, well, maybe Eli Drinkwitz will be a backup plan. Again, speaking of USF in South Florida, I actually think Alex Golesh is much more of a realistic and the type of candidate that Florida has gotten in the recent past. Also, somebody like John Sumrall from Tulane. Those two types of players, those coaches, their profiles far more realistic than that of Eli Drinkwitz. For example, look at all of Florida's recent hires since Steve Spurrier. You had Ron Zook. He was the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. Former assistant under Steve Spurrier, by the way. Then, of course, the Gators struck gold with Urban Meyer. You may forget he was the head coach of Utah at the time from the Mountain West Conference. Now, Utah was having a big-time undefeated type season, so that's kind of a special circumstance there. But notice Urban Meyer was not at a fellow SEC school. He was at Mountain West champion Utah. It's a little different than hiring the coach of Missouri or Ole Miss in 2025. Then you had Will Muschamp, the defensive coordinator of Texas. Jim McElwain, Colorado State's head coach. And then finally you get Dan Mullen, who was Mississippi State's head coach in 2018. So that's about as close of a comparison as you're going to get. I would point out that Mullen was very much attached to the Florida program as he was an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach under Urban Meyer and with Tim Tebow. Those are the connections that obviously Eli Drinkwitz not even close to having to the University of Florida. And then finally, your latest hire here, Billy Napier, who was the head coach at Louisiana. So you've got one major head coach there, Dan Mullen, who is hired by Florida since Steve Spurrier, since the year 2000, essentially, in this millennium. Based on that history, you're a heck of a lot more likely to get Alex Golesh from USF or John Sumrall from Tulane than you are to get Lane Kiffin or certainly Eli Drinkwitz too. I just think that's a big dose of reality that Florida fans might want to chug down here. And on the new Missouri starting quarterback, at least for the Texas A&M game and probably beyond, Matt Zollers, well, Eli Drinkwitz basically said that Missouri cannot play a scared football for the rest of the season. And if I were Drinkwitz, I would have said the exact same thing. But I got to say, in reality, I think Missouri should be playing a little bit more scared. And I'll explain exactly what I mean here in just a little bit. First, though, Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet. designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to improve, whether you're into running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. And this truly is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. And truly, this is the best of both worlds. If you're not the type of person who wants to go to a gym and be on display when you're working out, well, you're still going to get all the benefits of having a trainer, having classes, that type of thing with Peloton. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. So I can't say I've been the biggest fan of Tom Brady as an announcer so far, but I have to say he did make a point earlier in the season that has stuck in my craw really for about 2 months or so. It was Brady saying that on all these design quarterback runs, basically he was making the point that while we're in an era that attempts to protect the quarterback more than ever with the rules of the game in the NFL in particular, well, coaches are also asking their quarterbacks to run more with designed runs in particular than they ever have before. So his point there is there's a bit of irony there, and he thinks it's actually foolish the amount of times that teams are exposing their quarterbacks in the run game. Well, I'll say the Kansas City Chiefs have definitely dialed back their Patrick Mahomes definitely designed quarterback runs, certainly the quarterback sneaks from a few years ago when Mahomes on a quarterback sneak, well, he dislocated his kneecap there for a little bit, had it popped back in on the field and missed 2 or 3 ball games subsequently. Well, Eli Drinkwitz was talking about how, hey, we're not gonna play scared the rest of this season. I took that as, hey, we're just gonna call the same plays that we always play. I'll just say this. I thought it was interesting as I sort of have had that the basic idea that, hey, you know what? Quarterbacks, they get hurt in the pocket as much, if not more often than they do running the football. But the thing is, that doesn't quite get the point, because back to Tom Brady's point, okay, that may be true. But if you're asking your quarterback to run the football 10 times a game or something like that, well, you are exposing them to further injury. There is simply no question about that. And I think when it comes to Matt Zollers in Missouri the rest of the season, I really think these design quarterback runs, I think they got to be off the table for the rest of the season. Unless it's 4th down and the game is on the line or something like that. Even then in that situation, I got to be honest, I still think Ahmad Hardy has got to be the better option in short yardage. And if you're worried about getting the extra blocker, you know, that the quarterback direct run provides you, essentially you get an extra blocker than the quarterback handoff. I understand that. Well, fine, then go Wildcat. Then line Matt Zollers on the outside and just directly snap the ball to Hardy then, if that's what you want to do. I just think that's probably a more effective play considering what an excellent runner Ahmad Hardy is, number one. But number two, yes, you need to protect your quarterback. He's the last scholarship quarterback on the roster at this point. For all the talk of, hey, well, you know, they get hurt in the pocket too. Well, we now have 2 quarterbacks that have been injured essentially for the rest of the season on design quarterback runs with Sam Horn and with Bo Pribula. And by the way, you can go to 3 times. If you want to go back to last season, in the middle of last season, Missouri lost Brady Cook for most of the Auburn game, and then he sat out the next game for the Tigers when he got his ankle landed on during a designed quarterback run. The point here is that, yes, they're running more than ever, and yes, while they can definitely get hit in the pocket too, and they may even be more vulnerable in the pocket, simply put, the more exposures you give these players, it's quite simple. There's going to be consequences at some point for exposing these guys to injury. We've seen it before, and hey, Eli Drinkwitz should be playing cat and mouse and saying, well, we're not going to change our offense. What are you talking about? But in reality, I'm elbowing Kirby Moore in the ribs and saying, hey, You know that toss option play that you like to run near the goal line that's been really effective the last couple years, by the way? It's been a great play. Didn't work against Vanderbilt, got our quarterback hurt, and at the risk of somebody saying, hey, small sample size, all we need is one more small sample size to be down to a walk-on at quarterback for the rest of the year. So no matter what Drinkwitz says to the public, it's quite obvious to me that the Tigers have to play a little bit more conservatively with Matt Zollers and his ankles, especially, hey, he had his own ankle injury this time about last season too. All of this factors in, and I think if you're Missouri, you just simply got to take all of those design quarterback runs and just throw them out for the rest of this regular season at the very least. But hey, thanks for not throwing out this program, even though I missed yesterday's program and am likely to miss Fridays as well. Again, Missouri on a bye week. Tiger basketball starting on Monday as well. Going to have tons to get to here over the next few weeks. So you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to take a little bit of time off here, unless, I don't know, some crazy news may break or something, and then I'll just have to get in front of a microphone. But more likely than not, I'll be seeing you all on Monday right here on Locked On Mizzou.